Good morning. It is a chilly again Monday, April 25th, 2022, and this is DC Signal to Noise. Since we last talked, two new studies into the potential impacts of the Cattle Market Price Discovery and Transparency Act were completed and released. Fighting continued in Ukraine, but there are some reports that Ukrainian farmers have decided to farm on. Spring crops are being planted in some locations. Cold and wet gave way to warm and windy, then warm and rainy, and the forecast for the last full week of April looks more like it should for the first week of the month. Corn sales to China were confirmed. The Cincinnati Reds snapped an 11-game losing streak. The Cubs dropped 2 games below 500, and the Nationals, well, the Nationals are trying to figure out if they can play themselves out of contention in April. Good morning, Jim. How are you?
And they can and they will.
And they are, is what it looks like.
Do not have a good team. I've got my new Warby Parker glasses, and about every 4 sets of glasses, you get one that you really like, and this could be it. And I'm pretty negative, but this could be it.
Oh, goodness. You must really like those.
I like them. They're big.
All right.
They're big.
They're big. All right. How are you, buddy? Anything happening over the weekend?
Well, hopefully I'll get my SUV back after the squirrel ate. I got vivid pictures for people if they want to see. They chewed through that soy oil wrapping around my wires, so to the tune of $1,600.
Oh, good grief. Good grief. There's something you can do about that. I'm just saying.
I can park in the garage, but that's my man cave. But thank goodness for State Farm insurance and comprehensive insurance.
Love it. Love it. All right. I'm going to throw this out there a couple of times during the show or during the conversation today, Jim. If you want to participate in the conversation, we'd love to have you do that. There is a comments tab on your page. Click on that. It'll open up a dialogue box for you. Type it in there. I'll be watching for it. Jim will be watching for it. And even Joe, our producer, will be watching for it. Jim, I want to go back to something last week that I thought was really unique that happened for agriculture. And the FBI put out a warning to farmers in elevators to be watching for those cyber attacks, the ransomware attacks. I don't recall that happening before.
Yeah, it has happened before.
Okay,
but they made a big more of the to do about it, this time. So I don't know whether they suspect more or not, especially with the war,
right.
in Ukraine, and the pariah Putin is trying to stop Ukrainian production, so why wouldn't he want to stop ours as well?
Right, absolutely. And it does take us right back to what is happening in Ukraine. The U.S. is offering additional military support and, frankly, a lot more money to aid Ukraine in their efforts to turn Russia back.
And they're getting the type of, or will be getting the type of weapons, Chip, that could take them into the winning category if they get them on time.
And that, I think, has become more and more of the goal, hasn't it, Jim? A clear victory for Ukraine?
Absolutely. I think our country waited too late to get going there. I think we tried to dance. We were fearing what Putin may do, but that's no way to do things like that. So yeah. I think that they see nothing is going to stop him pell-mell of going into other countries. By the way, that was the message you got from so our top officials, that he's not going to stop. He will not stop with Ukraine.
Right. And Blinken was in Kyiv over the weekend, wasn't he?
They were both, and our defense secretary. Yes, okay. It was a so-called secret, but it was leaking like a sieve last week. And I know a lot of reporters probably kept it quiet for, security concerns.
Right. Anything in particular that we need to know about that happened at that meeting?
We haven't had the full readouts yet, but they made it clear to the Ukrainian leader that he is not going to get more monetary aid, but he's going to get some hefty military aid, and not just from the United States.
Okay. All right. Another foreign happening that I think we need to be keeping really close track of is what's happening in China. Parts of Beijing are in a lockdown. There's still widespread lockdowns. The number of people under lockdown it's like right at 400 million people. Something. It's crazy, man.
Yes, and when I was doing the early news and markets, Chip, you could just feel on the financial side, this is going to be an ugly day in the equities because you saw a major downturn in Chinese equities because of the growing escalation of COVID cases. Now, if you expand that to Beijing, we're talking impacts, Chip, and the logistics snafus are going to increase, not decrease. So that brings us into the world logistics area as well. A number of U.S. companies over there, including Tesla, are saying this could set it back about 3 months.
Yeah. And every chance the Chinese people that are in those lockdown situations, when they get a chance to get out and get some food, it's a scramble to get it because there's it looks like the shortages that many have feared are really starting to develop.
Yeah, they are, and they're not equipped with the number of people they have in these two huge cities, Shanghai and Beijing, to cope with food logistic concerns. So again, I think it's going to get pretty ugly over there, Chip.
Yeah, to have one global leader or leader of a country that can have a major impact on global political affairs, kind of backed into a corner and wondering what Putin's next step is going to be. That's one thing. To have two at the same time that are dealing with domestic issues and so on, it just it creates a level of tension that I'm not used to.
Well, yeah, and you don't want another diversion like what
No,
Putin did in Russia because his numbers were going down. And where did he go? He went into Ukraine. This is not a prediction that Xi is going to go into Taiwan, but boy, Xi's got this party Congress coming up in November, and it's clear that their zero COVID case policy was not the right approach. But he's not going to move until after that party Congress.
right. Uh, the Rockefeller Foundation over the weekend called for debt relief and emergency aid to the poor nations to avert massive immediate food crisis. The comments from U.S. Treasury Secretary Yellen last week about that measures need to be taken to avoid that. It feels like it's a planning for the worst scenario.
We could have a worst case scenario, Chip. And again, I don't like to say these things. That as a history student, I've been here before, and this is increasing, not decreasing. A little updated news here from the U.S. side, Chip. USDA came out this morning at 8 o'clock. Central Time with the food price forecast update, and once again, all all food and grocery store price forecasts were increased. A 14-year high in food price inflation, the biggest increases since 2008. Restaurant prices are the only area that was not increased this month. That's the kind of bottom line of the report this morning.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you've got your food prices up that much, but restaurant prices aren't, the health of the restaurant industry in this country is declining. It's not improving right now. There was that big uptick on the, let's get everybody back to normal and get people back out and eating again. They had that resurgence, but the labor issues, Jim, they they're having a tough time getting over that.
Yeah,
Over this.
I had a very good friend, Paul Myers, you know him, just
Yeah.
returned from Hawaii trip with his entire family, and he said he could not believe the number of tourists. It was hard getting in restaurants there.
Hmm.
So the travel, at least to Hawaii, has really increased.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there are people that are getting out and about. I've got some friends and family that are in Nashville over the weekend that they are getting these places are getting back to normal, which is a great thing. But there's still confusion in the air,
Yeah.
in air travel on whether or not you got to have a mask and where, when, and how.
Well, I'm going to find out Friday. I go to Fort Myers to an RCIS
Oh,
meeting, and then I travel over the weekend to Kansas City to a SEPA meeting. So I'm gonna check it out. I think I have Delta and United, and at least both of those airlines have said you don't have to wear a mask. I hope it continues
yeah,
while I travel because I can't wait to travel without a mask.
yeah, right, right. Um, Last week, the Biden administration cabinet officials were out on the road, really uh, promoting the infrastructure spending, Jim, and the projects that are being launched. That's going to continue for a little while.
That will continue, but consumers are in no mood for tell me how great you are type of speeches, and that's really what it is. I don't blame the administration for touting it. I think it was one of the few bipartisan victories that they have, and goodness knows that our infrastructure needs the investment, not only improvements, but the fixing around the panoply of things, our great river systems, our
Yeah,
railroad systems, etc. But with this inflation, that's the tax, and you see it every day, not only at the pump, but in food stores. And when I go to the food store, I'm hearing it big time on the complaints. Like, wow! And I'm seeing more pencil pushing with the
yeah,
calculators at the that I've seen in years. So
yeah.
that tells you the impact.
Right, right. No doubt about it. Okay, let's talk about the rail situation. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is going to be making some comments on the efforts to resolve the rail service delays, and I'm not exactly sure how this all started, Jim.
Well, the Surface Transportation Board (STB) is holding this week two public hearings. On and the Biden administration officials, including, as you said, Buttigieg and Jewel Brownell, the USDA Deputy Secretary, are going to be among the many people going to testify. Also, executives from all the major railways, Chip. So that should prove an interesting 2 days to get to the bottom, hopefully, of some of these estimates of how long it's going to return to so-called normal service. The piggyback issue, is agriculture being identified as a priority item on this that hasn't been the case before. So we're going to have this is the week to air out the issues on the transportation side.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be aired out big time. Now, Friday on the free for all on Agri Talk, Sean Haney from Real Agriculture was talking about it centers around companies like CF Industry wanting to put their private cars on the United Pacific lines, uh, which is common practice, but they're just not getting the access that they once had.
Yeah.
So it's a real issue. There's no question. Darren Kopic from the Ag Retailers Association is going to be on Agri Talk this morning, and we're going to talk about the impact that the ag retail industry is feeling because of this slowdown in rail shipments. But timing couldn't be worse for CF Industry and other fertilizer providers to lose space on the rail lines, Jim.
No, no, I agree. And hopefully the issue of fertilizer delivery, not only the supply situation, but can the railways take accelerated shipment of whatever fertilizer and other ag chemicals are available? Hopefully that issue will be brought up in either Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay. All right.
You know,
There is
on the logistics side, I reported this morning that the congestion chip at the ports of LA and Long Beach have worsened in March. So we're taking a step back. They ended 3 straight months of improvement. So I think we have a snapback in place.
okay. All right. One other thing that happened over the weekend that I think we need to talk about quickly before we get really into the week ahead, and Macron won another French presidency. I don't know if it was a surprise or not, but he didn't have a whole lot of support going into it.
No, but the margin was some bit larger than the
Yeah,
late polls were suggesting. So, interestingly so, the White House chief of staff, Ron Klain, tweeted, I think jokingly, that, because Macron's popularity was what, very low,
yeah,
36 or 38%, and
36.
he still won. And Ron Klain said the famous,
Yeah,
referring to Biden's low numbers.
yeah. What that shows is you can have a low approval rating, but you still got to put competition up against them.
That's true. And she had been there before, and it got too dicey at this time because she could easily be attacked by being too close to Putin. And that was not the right timing for her.
Right. And Macron also compared her to former President Trump and said, listen, if you're casting a vote for her, you're casting a vote for President Trump. If you're
Yeah.
voting for her, you're voting for Brexit. Let's not make some of the same mistakes that that was his line, and the French voters they kind of swarmed to it at the last moment.
Yeah, I think he got just over 58% of the vote. But
Yeah.
it was the lowest number in a lot of years there. So that tells you too the enthusiasm gap in France.
Well, I believe I also saw something over the weekend that it was on average the youngest group of voters
Hmm.
in France in a long time. So it's the older voters that have kind of thrown their hands in the air and said, "Listen, we don't want anything to do with this anymore."
Yeah, huh. Be interesting here because November 8th midterm elections,
Right.
usually younger people do not vote to the degree in midterm elections. So we'll have to see
Right.
if that's the case. Although the younger voters are quite negative now on President Biden as well, based on some of the latest polls.
Well, okay, lawmakers are expected to take that up here this week. Both the House and the Senate are back, and the Democrats are there. They want to take quick action on a couple of key issues. You got the student loans, you got the drug prices, and this morning I heard a proposal for a $30 minimum wage. Why not make it 100?
That means Bernie's running for president. Bernie
Yeah.
Sanders. I don't feel the burn there. These are
Start with
cosmetic.
student loan forgiveness.
Uh, I'll tell you, I was at a dinner not too long ago with the House editor for the Cook Political Report, David Wasserman, and I was telling him that I think this will be announced pretty late in the campaign before November 8th by the White House. And Dave said, he didn't know how that cut totally for the Democrats because there's mixed opinions on that issue. If you outright forgive the debt, what about all those kids and parents who paid off that college tuition? So I think that they'll just keep on extending the repayment. But this is a big issue in colleges, I'll tell you that, as well it should, because huge amounts to be repaid. They don't want to pay it.
Okay. What about on drug pricing?
There will be
There,
something on drug prices.
right, right.
Popular.
Yeah, on both sides.
Yes, and I would weakly believe that the Democrats will have another reconciliation bill, Chip, and that's where it's going to include some of the energy provisions that they want and have really been dealing with Joe Manchin, the centrist Democrat from West Virginia, and that's why all these letters are starting to come out through like last week, urging the sustainable aviation fuel credit and things like
Yeah.
that. So the lobbyists are gearing up for an eventual vote, and I really think I see it coming. So-called down payment on their new Green Deal.
Okay. Well, the infrastructure for the sustainable aviation fuel, we talked with Jordan Fife from BioUrgia about it last week. The Colonial Pipeline can already handle it and deliver it, I think, to 7 major airports on the East Coast directly to them.
Yeah.
The infrastructure is getting out in front of the supply. That's an amazing feat in the biofuels industry.
Yes, I
So,
like when infrastructure is ahead.
yeah,
I really do. That's like out here in the east. My county, Loudoun, learned from Fairfax County that you build the schools and the off ramps and the roads before your population surges. And because we saw how Fairfax County didn't do it right. So I like infrastructure to be anticipatory.
yeah, very cool. Very cool. Okay. Okay, there were 2 studies released last week. One from a group of ag economists, a distinguished group
Yes, very
of
much.
ag economists, and the second from Texas A&M. The consortium study that was released, Jim, it basically said that the cattle price discovery and market uh, Transparency Act uh, provides no benefit to cattle producers
Yeah.
and will increase costs by hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah. The data, if we wanted to go on the data, now you can, this was a broad brush of land grant university ag
Mhm.
economist, as you said, the working group. And then you have very well respected analyst at Texas A&M, the ag policy, people do an update based on the revised bill. And although they modified some of the impact of the initial legislation, it would have a draconian impact on Southern producers. That was clear in the analysis. So again, I know Grassley kind of poo-poos some of the stuff, but this is pretty rich academic peer group looking at this impact. So I just think, although I respect the senator from Iowa, he thinks that I think he's right by saying it'll come out of the committee in a vote. I'm not quite so sure on the floor because look at all those Southern senators who are going to look at these
Well,
bona fide reports and saying, "Do I want to support this?"
right, and the report out of Texas A&M, it really showed that if we're going to see a vast majority of the increase in cash negotiated trade would have to take place in the southern markets. Uh,
Yes,
we're doing plenty in the northern markets.
yes,
Um, and so that means don't just think of it as more negotiated cash trade. Also think about it as less use of the AMAs, the alternative marketing arrangements that have become very popular with the producers, with the feed yard, with the packers in that southern market. And Jim, this whole thing is one of the reasons that it really troubles me is why did this whole conversation get started? It got started because of the big four making big money while the feed yards were losing big money. So that was a packer versus producer. It's now evolved or morphed into a northern cattle finisher versus southern cattle finisher. And I hate those kinds of fractures in any kind of the ag industry. It normally doesn't end well when you've got quantity fighting quality
you're
in this kind of a market.
you hit the nail on the head, and that's where mistakes can be made,
Yeah,
Chip. So
yeah.
we're going to have to see. Before I forget, Gary Rasmussen
Oh
mentioned
yeah.
student debt. The largest and increasing voting group has college debt, not a question of if, but when. In theory, I agree with that, but it would cost a huge amount of taxpayer money.
Now, did you see the follow-up that he made there? The
The
main
main
reason?
reason this group understands they will not see a nickel of Social Security. Mm.
See, I used to think the same thing for me. And the closer I get to it, the more I think, well, maybe someday I am going to see at least some of a Social Security check. Do I have a chance?
I think
Yeah.
so. You have a
Yeah.
chance to see it, but your
What about
kid,
my daughter?
that's
Yeah.
jump
Yeah.
ball, a jump ball.
Right.
But again, on this issue, what does that signal give to people who are just now going to college?
Right.
Do they? How can with a straight face can they take out a loan to go to college if they're not going to? Their heart says they're not going to repay it.
Right.
I don't. That's where we've broken down that system. Did
It's
all
called
of that money? Did they think they were not going to have to pay it?
yeah, it's called skin in the game.
Yes,
You
yeah,
know, you've got to have ownership of that debt, and if you've got ownership of the debt, then you've got ownership of your career and your responsibility to pay it back.
yes.
That's how I see it. Okay, we're going to get the farm bill up and debate conversation really up and running in this on the Senate side by
In
the
the
end of the
Senate,
week.
yeah, because the
Yeah,
House has already done it.
yeah,
It's
House is already there.
very contentious hearings in a number of occasions, but they're going to have a field hearing, and I always like field hearings. The first one is legitimately it's where the Senate Ag, Chairwoman Debbie Stabenow resides in Michigan, and that'll really begin the process, Chip. And you got to look at the groups who are going to be represented and things like that. But I'd much rather send it outside Washington to hear the grassroots approach.
Yeah. Okay, Jim, we've only got a couple of minutes left here. You know what I like to do here at the end? Let's open it up to you kind of freestyling. What else are you really watching this week?
Well, the House appropriations hearings go through almost every day this week, and we're going to hear from Secretary Vilsack. We're going to hear on Friday from EPA Administrator Michael Regan. So there's the opportunity for lawmakers to really cast a wide net on some key issues. I hope Vilsack is asked about whatever they're calling the WHIP Plus now. They changed the name about the rollout for the 2020 and 2021 eligible crops, because that continues to be an email I frequently get, but I always have to answer back. They said May, and we're getting close to it, so hopefully we'll get an update. From the Ag Secretary on that. The other big issues, we have a Supreme Court
Right.
ruling coming up on prayer in sports. That'll be of note. And you have some good news is that they approved another Michigan, I think, plant for accelerated
Yeah.
line speeds. Chip.
Yep.
That was
At Coldwater.
that happened late Friday. And,
Yep.
I noticed this on the weekend. I have time to go through all my emails. Proposition 12.
Yeah.
Last month the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case from the MPPC and Farm Bureau. Last week, Chip, Senators Dianne Feinstein, Democrat California, Alex Padilla, Democrat California, Cory Booker, Democrat New Jersey, and Senate Ag Committee Chairwoman Debbie Stabenow from Michigan all called on Vilsack to support the Proposition 12 in the case. Now that caught my eye, especially with Stabenow, because the mainstream groups in agriculture are definitely on the opposite side of this.
Oh yeah.
They know, for reasons we've discussed, that if you allow that to go, there's the template that activist strident groups are going to use against agriculture beyond the poultry and eggs, which already face it, and the pork industry, they'll have the template to come out after mainstream agriculture.
Right, right. Yeah, this is going to be a precedent-setting case in so many ways that um, it's very important that animal agriculture get a fair shake on this one, and uh, producers know how to best care for the animals that they've got in their care.
Yes, and we're going to see whether or not NCBA comes out officially with a revised approach to this cash marketing,
Right,
Chip. So
right.
that could surface any day now.
Another one that I'm going to be watching pretty close. Lael Brainerd is going to be considered nomination to be vice chairman of the board of governors of the Federal Reserve.
Yes, I think that will eventually be approved. But we're seeing a lot of more targeted criticism of our Federal Reserve. The Economist, their cover story was how the Fed failed. In order for them to get their soft landing, it's going to be extremely difficult. And the confidence of our Fed is just not there at this particular time. Again,
Right.
I hate to see that, Chip.
Okay. All right, Jim. I think that's a wrap, isn't it?
I think it is.
All right. Don't forget this morning on Agri Talk, Darren Kopic, President and CEO of the Ag Retailers Association, is going to give us some perspective on what the rail lines in Union Pacific is doing by restricting access to the rail lines. And of course, Machinery Pete, Greg Peterson, will be on with an update of the used machinery markets. Go Cubs. Go Nats. Did I get one?
Cardinals. Go Cards.
Go Cards. Going back to the old days. Have a great week, everybody. Keep watching for those signals.